The prevailing narrative is a calculated distraction. Media fixates on the kinetic threat, hypersonic missiles, carrier groups, troop movements. This is a low-probability, high-cost scenario designed for public consumption. The strategic objective is not to outfight the United States, it is to bankrupt it. The war is not kinetic, it is economic, and its primary vector is silence. The active cyber attacks on Taiwan's critical infrastructure are not isolated acts of espionage. As documented by Cybersecurity News, they are systemic rehearsals. These are not penetrations to steal data. They are tests to map the switches, the critical nodes that can be disabled on command. This is the blueprint for a system-wide shutdown. The first vector of this silent attack is subterranean. 99% of all intercontinental data, including the $10 trillion in daily financial transactions that underpin the US dollar, travels through a few hundred fiber optic cables on the ocean floor. According to analysts at RUSI, many of these cables bottleneck in predictable choke points, the same areas seeing proxy escalations, like the waters near Yemen. Severing a handful of these is not an act of war, it is an act of systemic liquidation. The second vector is orbital. The obsession with anti-satellite missiles is another misdirection. The kinetic cost is too high, and the debris is a liability. CSIS reports confirm the real threat is soft kill, dazzling, jamming, and cyber hijacking. It is the ability to blind a network of satellites without firing a single shot, to render GPS, secure communications, and financial timing signals useless. This two-pronged assault on the digital nervous system is designed to create a specific condition, the blind Leviathan. A nation-state with the most powerful military hardware in human history, but its eyes are gouged out and its spinal cord is severed. It possesses unmatched kinetic force, but lacks the data to target it, the communications to coordinate it, and the financial liquidity to sustain it. This is the endgame, not military defeat, but induced systemic paralysis. The primary motive is not conquest, it is solvency. A full-scale kinetic war against a superpower like the United States is a mathematically certain path to national bankruptcy. The cost of challenging the U.S. Navy carrier for carrier, jet for jet, is a domestic liability no spreadsheet can justify. This entire strategy is engineered to circumvent that cost. CSIS analysis on recent conflicts, such as Russia's engagement, frames the modern war not as a geopolitical chess move, but as a systemic solvency crisis. An unpopular, high-cost kinetic campaign becomes the ultimate domestic liability. It drains financial reserves, while simultaneously bankrupting the political capital required to govern. This weakness is not a failure, it is the catalyst. It forces a strategic pivot away from conventional, symmetric warfare. The pivot is to asymmetric escalation. Instead of building a $10 billion aircraft carrier, an adversary allocates a fraction of that cost to vectors with exponential impact. Cyber attacks targeting Taiwanese critical infrastructure create regional instability for pennies on the dollar. Proxy forces escalating near Aden disrupt global shipping, imposing trillions in logistical costs on the West. These are not isolated acts of chaos. They are high-leverage trades against a system that has become too expensive to defend conventionally. This strategy exploits the economic fragility of the target. While analysts focus on whether a market crash will happen, they miss the point. The objective is to bleed the system slowly, draining its financial and logistical liquidity. When a military titan is systematically deleveraged, stripped of its economic instruments of power, its response protocol becomes dangerously simple. It is forced to escalate to the one asymmetric tool where it retains absolute dominance, where the kinetic cost-to-effect ratio is unmatched, its nuclear arsenal. The blueprint is designed to make economic weakness the direct accelerant for nuclear brinkmanship. The core of the insolvency strategy is not complex. It is a mathematical problem of kinetic cost. The entire economic and military foundation of a superpower is built on high-cost, high-leverage assets. This is now its primary liability. According to analysis from strategic bodies like the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, the cost equation has been inverted. A $5 million main battle tank can now be systemically targeted and neutralized by a $500 first-person view drone. This is not a battlefield advantage. It is a blueprint for bleeding a treasury dry. For every single high-cost asset a superpower fields, an adversary can deploy 10,000 disposable counter-assets. The superpower is forced into a zero-sum game of attrition, where its own financial strength becomes the weapon used against it. This is the democratization of violence. Lethal, high-impact capability is no longer the exclusive domain of nation-states with trillion-dollar budgets. It has been decentralized, commoditized, and made available at scale to non-state actors and proxy forces operating in global choke points. They are not fighting to win. They are fighting to make winning too expensive for you to afford. The primary theater of engagement is not a conventional battlefield. It is the gray zone. These are regions of engineered instability, deliberately chosen to function as proxy laboratories for asymmetric warfare. The objective is not to win territory, but to stress test the logistical and economic vulnerabilities of a superpower at a distance. Examine the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The escalation of forces near Aden, as documented by Anadolu Ajansı, is not random regional chaos. It is a live fire simulation. The strategic question being answered is, what is the minimum kinetic cost required to disrupt a critical artery of global commerce and inflict maximum economic liability on Western supply chains? Simultaneously, a second front is established in the digital domain. Cybersecurity news confirms active attacks by state-sponsored hackers against Taiwan's critical infrastructure. This is not a prelude to invasion. It is a clinical test of systemic disruption protocols. The goal is to perfect the blueprint for paralyzing a modern, integrated economy without firing a single shot. These proxy laboratories, from maritime choke points to internal social fractures in nations like Canada or South Africa, as noted by CSIS reports, are symptoms, not causes. They are staging grounds to measure response times, calculate economic damage, and refine the tactics of systemic erosion. Each event provides critical data for the final phase of the operation. The cumulative effect of these gray zone operations is the slow, methodical erosion of trust in the systems underpinning American power. As Ray Dalio warns, the surge in assets like gold is a direct signal of this systemic deleveraging. The instability is not the product, it is the process. A distributed attack designed to make the US dollar a mathematical liability. The ultimate risk is not chaos in Yemen or a blackout in Taipei. The risk is the mathematical certainty of the outcome. The gray zone is the mechanism to bankrupt the hegemon from the outside in, forcing it into a solvency crisis where its only remaining leverage is a launch-on warning nuclear posture. Economic weakness is the direct accelerant for kinetic escalation. The nuclear command protocol known as launch-on warning is not a relic of the Cold War. It is an active systemic liability. The doctrine dictates that a nation launches its nuclear arsenal upon detection of an incoming enemy strike, before that strike makes impact. This protocol's entire function hinges on one fragile asset: data integrity from early warning radar and satellite networks. This dependency is now the primary vector of attack. Reports confirm state-level actors are actively targeting critical infrastructure. CSIS analysis indicates these are not random acts of digital vandalism. They are strategic probes to identify and map systemic vulnerabilities in command, control, and communications. This creates the fog of digital war. When a cyber attack blinds the radar network, the commander faces a zero-sum calculation. Is the signal loss a system malfunction, or is it a deliberate blinding action, the prelude to a decapitation strike already in the air? The kinetic cost of waiting to find out is total annihilation. The protocol, therefore, forces the commander's hand. Fear becomes a mathematical certainty. The doctrine of deterrence is inverted, with the defender's own protocol becoming the accelerant for escalation. A non-kinetic cyber attack is engineered to trigger the ultimate kinetic response. It is the blueprint for forcing a superpower to bankrupt itself by its own hand, using its own rules. The doctrine of asymmetric escalation requires periodic tests of the target system's fragility. These are not attacks, they are calibration shots. Their purpose is twofold: to measure systemic response time and to quantify the kinetic cost of a full-spectrum solvency crisis. We are now entering the window for such a test. The methodology has been field-tested. As confirmed by cybersecurity reports, Chinese state actors are actively stress-testing Taiwan's critical infrastructure. This is the live-fire exercise. They are mapping dependencies, identifying single points of failure, and refining the digital payload required to induce systemic paralysis. The strategic objective mirrors the kinetic pressure applied to physical choke points. While Yemeni forces escalate near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait to disrupt maritime logistics, the next vector targets a digital choke point. The goal is identical: paralyze trade, disrupt supply chains, and inflict maximum economic damage with minimal attribution. Therefore, the calibration shot will not be a declared cyber attack. It will manifest as a physical event with digital consequences, designed for plausible deniability. Analysts at CSIS have modeled scenarios involving non-state actors or catastrophic accidents to achieve strategic ends without triggering a treaty response. Expect a coordinated, multi-point, accidental fiber optic cable disruption targeting the primary and redundant networks connecting the Port of Virginia to the MAE East Internet Exchange Point. The event will occur during a peak shipping cycle. The objective is to achieve a 72-hour logistics blackout, testing the nation's response to a sudden, localized solvency event while trust in the dollar is already eroding.